Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Eggburt, the owner of this station. Check out my website at eggburt.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, eggburt.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
You can check out our website at bjshow.co, just like Eggburt said. By the way, I had a couple things to talk about in our second segment here, but you're going to make fun of my social media stuff? Is that what you're going to... Yeah, you're going to...
See, by the way, Brad, you are assuming negative intent when somebody says they have a compliment for you, which sounds like a deeper issue. Because when I say that I have a compliment for you, you should assume positive intent, which means that I'm going to be positive. Here's what is great about you on social media in 2024 that you didn't used to do, Brad. And more specifically, it's something you don't do that you used to do. What you don't do and what I appreciate is that you don't take clips of our show, segments, whether it's YouTube or whatever, and you're not the reply guy. You don't do reply spam. Like, you don't go in if elected official says, oh, the Missouri state budget has doubled in the last 7 years. Can you believe it? You don't go in and put a link to our show as if we're talking about something involving that. Now, in the past, and by the way, Brad, this is the statute of limitations has run out on all this. But in the past, when I followed you on Twitter, if elected official X would say that, back when you did the BS show with Shelley, you would include a link to the BS show for something unrelated to an elected official said. And then I would listen to the BS show, and I'd be like, when's Brad going to talk about the state budget? This is going to be awesome. And then the first 5 minutes were you calling Shelley because she wasn't on the line, and then you tried to get her on the line, and then we sit through this, and then you sit through the show, and there would be nothing about the state budget. And I'd be like, why would Brad post reply spam to public official X? Now, what you don't do, Brad, and what I appreciate is that you don't take our show and do reply spam. And I appreciate that because we don't spam people here. We don't do that kind of stuff here. And I appreciate you not doing that.
Well, somebody who likes something I do for a change, or something I don't do, actually. Because of the fact that I have my haters out there. And, once again, the crazy thing about it is I don't go out of my way to bother anybody. If anything, I truly believe in the complimentary aspect of life. Hey, great. I used to have someone who used to work for me, and the running joke was on Monday morning when everybody would come back in from the weekend, this particular person would sit down and say, well, I went out with my girlfriends on Friday night, and we went down to the hill, and the pasta wasn't al dente, and the wine didn't taste very good, and there weren't enough ice cubes in our ice. And then on Saturday night, we went down to downtown, and the food, our steak was tough. And I go like, is there ever anything that you do that you
people that only see the negative and stuff, right? And that's a problem with lack of gratitude.
Okay, lack of gratitude. Okay, there we go. Okay, two things to talk about. Okay, you and I have an age difference. Do you remember the Pope's visit to the city of St. Louis?
Oh, yeah, it was 1999, and Mel Carnahan was governor, and he leaned on Carnahan to exonerate some murderer.
And do you remember what happened, or actually, probably more importantly, what didn't happen?
Let's see. Oh, was it was it something about serving communion?
No, nobody showed up. Remember the news stations?
Oh, yeah, he was in the Pope mobile and they didn't have big crowds.
Well, the news stations for like months, when the Pope gets here, there's going to be 5 million people coming to the St. Louis area.
Yeah, I remember that.
You're not going to be able to walk in downtown St. Louis, and the exact opposite happened where nobody was anywhere. It was like everybody went like, "Oh my God." And remember it was a weekday. They closed the schools down. The whole crazy thing. I was actually doing news at the time for one of my companies, and my assignment, I signed myself to go to the airport, and the airport was like deserted. There was nobody there. I-70, you could have gone 119 miles an hour down I-70, not 120, but 119 down I-70. It was crazy. Okay. For the past week, I keep hearing the stories on national news about, oh my God, the cities that are in the eclipse zone, they're bringing in extra police because there's going to be 40 million people show up in so-and-so Texas to watch. I'm going like, what?
Yes. And by the way, there's a link on my website today, Brad, of quote, overwhelming, unquote, eclipse crowd expected at Elephant Rocks.
You know, we went through the eclipse. Matter of fact, I can tell you where we was at because Shelley and I got hired to do a remote broadcast at two different parks. Of all crazy things, I was at Klondike Park, which is interesting. I was at Klondike Park. That was when there were actually people in there. And Shelley was out at one of the new parks. Is that Wapplehorst? I can't remember what it is. It's on Double D, south of the new O'Day Park. It's probably.
I would have thought you'd assign yourself to some Double Ds, Brad.
No. So anyway, that was when, and we were hired by essentially the St. Charles County Parks and Rec, where we did a live broadcast a whole bit. Okay.
Oh, nice.
And it was sort of cool. And matter of fact, at my location, I was at there's a shelter, a pretty neat little shelter in Klondike Park. And there was a guy, and I'm like the doing the play-by-play and playing music and stuff like that, playing the radio station. And a guy comes up to me and says, when it gets full eclipse, I'm going to propose to my girlfriend. And he says, can you come over and take some pictures of me? And I say, yeah, I'd be more than happy to. So sure enough, at the full eclipse, he drops down on his knee in front of his girlfriend and asks her to marry her, which I thought was sort of cool. But, okay, now once again, we're at Klondike Park, and I think Klondike Park set a record for the attendance that day. I think there were all of 23 or 24 people in the park that day, which set an all-time record for attendance in Klondike Park. But the point being is, I keep hearing these stories about, okay, let's compare the eclipse to the Pope. When the Pope was in St. Louis, there's a very limited area where the Pope was going to be. The Pope was going to be at the airport. Then he's going to go on I-70 downtown. Then he's going to go to the new cathedral. What is that in the Central West End? And then he was going back to the airport and he was going to be gone. Okay, we're talking about a swath of the United States, which goes from the Mexican border, and I think it's like 100 miles wide, and it goes all the way up through Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, southern part of Missouri into southern Illinois, and then essentially, it sort of does like a 45. If you look at it, the path on a map, it looks like a 45-degree slash starting like on, the Texas-Mexican border, which would be west of the Gulf of Mexico, all the way up into the Great Lakes. Okay, how in the world are you going to have huge crowds, which the police are going to have to control, in an area that's probably 1,000 square miles, something like that?
Yeah. I don't get why it's different, and this could very well be my ignorance, Brad. But I don't get why it's different viewing it in north of where I am or south of where I am. Like if your friends are having a party, that's like the only reason to leave wherever you are at that moment, I think.
Well, Dave Murray explained this the other day. I was listening to him on 97.1, and he gave a very good explanation of this. He says in the St. Louis area, we're going to have 98%. But he said that may sound like a big deal. He says, but it's not. He says because the sun is so bright, even with 2% of the sun shining through, it'll still be very light. And it won't be like super, super, super dark. It won't be like the eclipse that, back when, the day. But he did say that the nighttime animals will start to come out, and you'll hear animals that don't normally, make noises, and unless it's dark, you'll hear the animals start to do that. And I'm going like, okay, whatever. I mean, once again, I know there are people that are all excited about this, and I'm thinking to myself, if someone called me up right now and said, Brad, I'm going to pick you up, and we're going to go two places, and you pick which one. We're going to go and watch the eclipse, or we're going to go watch paint dry at a construction site. Yeah. I'd say, let's go watch the paint dry at the construction site, because I think that'll be a little bit more interesting. And by the way, there'll be some construction workers we can talk to and maybe have a good old time. Okay, that's just me. Okay, second thing is, here we go again, okay? And this is not me president bashing, but I don't understand what's going on with this, especially after the Supreme Court shut the president down. He's on the campaign trail today, and what's he pushing? forgiveness of more college loans. Okay?
Yeah, why not, Brad? If you take some money out, why should you be expected to pay it back?
Well, because what about the people who didn't go to college? What about the people who paid for their college?
Well, that's, tough, said the kitty, but the milk's still good. That's the decision they made, Brad.
How would you like to be the parents of kids who scrimped and saved so their kids could go to college,
Yes.
and yet the president say, well, we're going to forgive these loans. Now, if he's going to forgive some loans, I got a car loan he can forgive?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Brad, it's an election year gambit, and it's also the idea that if you have made bad financial decisions, it's not your fault. Somebody else should pay for it. And you know what, Brad? As some of our friends who are Democrats will point out, it's the government's money. It's not like it's real money. It's just the government forgiving debt, Brad.
But here we go again. Where does the government get that money from, John?
Well, they pray really hard, Brad. They pray to the oyster bunny, because I think that's how it works. And then they just get the money, Brad. And you know what? To quote Jamal Bowman talking about reparations, just print more money.
Say hello to
Just print
oyster
more money,
bunnies.
Brad.
Say hello to oyster bunnies.
But the notion, Brad, and here's the thing. I think for every vote, and I've seen no numbers on this, Brad, so this is pure conjecture, but every vote that the Democrats get and that Biden gets for saying, hey, don't have to worry about that student loan, don't have to pay it back, there is a mother and a father and a student that says that's in their 40s now that says, wait a minute, I chose to not go to college, or I chose to go to Harvard on the highway instead of going to Mizzou, or I chose to learn a trade or whatever, instead of taking on that debt. This is not fair. You guys talk about fairness all the time. This is not fair. So I think for every vote the Democrats get for this, they at least lose one vote.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess the thing that bothers me about this is this, and the Supreme Court shot this down. Now, the interesting part to me is, once again, and I'm not going to sound like I'm a Trump lover, but Trump gets in trouble for these very, 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 very technical aspects of the law. I mean, like the fact that he just got this huge judgment against him because of the fact that he essentially screwed the banks. Although the banks, during the testimony, said, hey, we
don't have a problem with
we don't have a problem with this guy. He's a whale, man. We wish we had more clients like him. He repaid his loans. We didn't have any problem. Matter of fact, he repaid some of them early. Okay. But yet we've got a Supreme Court which essentially says you can't forgive these loans, but yet the president is finding legal loopholes so we can forgive these loans. Matter of fact, he already forgave one set of loans to and once again, I'm not making fun of any kind of people when I say this, but I heard a guy give a very, very well-reasoned article, or very well-reasoned explanation of this, that he forgave loans to public safety officers, people who were policemen and firemen. And one of the interesting aspects was, this guy said the people that have the best protection are the public service people, who are the firefighters and the police officers, because they have great benefits, they have great pension, they have great health care. They're the ones that don't need this. It's the guy who went to school, who maybe is unfortunately underemployed because he's got a degree in appreciation of comfortable shoes or something like that. and you know what I'm saying? It's to the point where
I know exactly what you're saying. And of course, the practical nature of it is that God forbid you stand up and say that you are against any kind of protection for first responders or your favorite group, Brad, teachers.
Well, you're exactly right, John. I mean, and once again, I have tremendous respect for fire professionals and for the police department. Remember, I told this story before. I put myself through college as a police dispatcher, and it changed my life forever. And once again, I've told people, I think we've even talked about it in this show before, if you get pulled over, the words that never should come out of your mouth are, do you know who I am? You don't ever want to say that to a police officer, because I know the cops who had that said to them, And several times the cops would come back into the squad room and say, yeah, I pulled over this guy and I was just going to give him a warning. And he said, do you know who I am? So I went back to my squad car and wrote him a state.
And I got my nightstick and I beat the hell out of him.
Right. No, I wrote him.
And I roughed him up.
I wrote him a ticket. Okay, because once again, the worst thing you can say to a cop is, not necessarily the worst, but one of the worst things is you want to essentially elevate yourself above him. In other words,
absolutely.
You have just...
And by the way, couldn't we apply that to every aspect of our lives?
Sure. I mean, like for example, I mean, there's so many things to the point where it's like, okay, why is it that someone gets preferential treatment over me? Why is it that when I go to the store, the lady who complains the most is the one who gets the manager to help her? You know what I mean? Why is that?
Absolutely.
You know? Okay, we have to take another break. Maybe just the beginning. Hold on, maybe I'll just play a couple.
I wish we had a little bumper music, Brad.
Oh, we do.
John Best, he's a man of taste. He's got a thing for a certain type of grace. He don't care about diamonds or pearls. All he wants is a girl with comfortable shoes.
How's that for bumper music?
It's so good, Brad. Oh my goodness.
Okay,
you think we could get Z1077 to start playing?
Man, they'll be on it tonight. You watch.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Best's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Best. That's Combest, John Best, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?